Welcome to Fraud Friday. I'm Bob Coleman, editor of the Coleman Report. Joining me is Lance Sexton, Delaney Sexton, no relation. Well, okay, no relation. Mom and we got a dad and a daughter here team. We cover issues for bankers. We have a great story for you about Anita Moody, a Texas banker. She was the president of the bank. Delaney, set it up. What did Anita do?
Anita Moody was a longtime employee at Enloe State Bank. She started when she was a teenager. And in 2019, a day before a review from the Texas Department of Banking, there was a crime that occurred at the bank. Stacks of files were placed on a table and set on fire. After an investigation, they found out that she created hundreds of false nominee loans with names of bank customers, loans for her boyfriend's business, friends' businesses, and for her own well-being and finances.
Lance, when we talk about these stories, we like to figure out why they were motivated to do this. This is a lady who started as a teenager. She's now 57, 58. So she's been with the bank for 40 years. That's one of our red flags. We talk about red flags. We talk about motivation. Greed is always up there. There's definitely greed. She got over $11 million worth of loans. But motivation on this, Lance, I know you're a former bank reviewer. How many times did you walk into a bank and you saw, we showed you the picture there, you saw a boardroom table full of charred files?
Well, Bob, I've never actually, in fact, I've worked 2 or 3 times in my career for FDIC on bank closures. And bank closures usually occurred on a Friday. We would be sitting outside the bank all day Friday, and then at about 4 or 5 o'clock Friday, we would come in the door and close the bank and take possession. I have never, Bob, seen files being burned, and in the ridiculous nature of files being burned, Bob, is there's an electronic copy of those files somewhere in the bank.
1960. This is
if this had occurred, Bob, back when I was a teenager, might have been something you could have gotten away with, but today every bank file, loan file, is electronically recorded, so burning the files probably didn't cover anything up. It probably just brought more attention to it.
Well, Miss Moody was the president of the bank, so she had a very high position. Obviously, she had. That's very impressive to start. I assume she started as a teller and worked her way up. Now, when this happened, the fire engine showed up and they said that it was on fire, but these items were piled in the boardroom instead of fire. I love this quote. Now, Lance, I'm going to throw you a hardball. Says Texas Department Banking Commissioner Charles Cooper. There was an indication something was wrong.
Yeah, I think a fire in the boardroom certainly would be an indication that something was wrong. In many cases, Bob, when we came in on bank closures and there were things like this, some of the motivation is just it's the old adage of keeping up with the Joneses. Being able to get additional money so you could buy nicer cars, join the country club, buy a big boat. So typically the motivation is financial. It's the wants. There's always needs and wants. And in wants, I want a new car. I want a new boat. I want a country club.
She got the new car. She got a new Jeep, which we've been covering these stories for a while. And normally they're a little bit more exotic, but I'm glad to see a Jeep is considered a luxury vehicle now. Paid off loans for her daughter. Funded her boyfriend's business, among other transactions. They are calling this one of the largest frauds in the history of Texas. There were over 100 fake loans. The bank had been around since the Great Depression, issuing cotton farmer loans, and it was one of the few institutions that was closed in 2021. There was a $21 million loss to the Federal Deposit Insurance Company. Lance, we're in an environment, just very quickly, contrast with the Great Recession. We're in an environment where not that many banks are failing. So for this bank to fail, a lot of bad things had to happen.
Oh, absolutely. we've not seen bank closures of any significance since, say, 2009, 2008, 9, and 10. We saw bank failures that were created during the Great Recession. It would take a pretty substantial number of fraudulent loans to cause a bank closure. But in this particular case, as Delaney indicated, there were more than 100, and Bob, you indicated more than 100 fraudulent loans that had no potential to be repaid. So
tell us a little bit more about Anita, Delaney. What else do we know about her?
I believe there were some problems going on in her own life.
Unfortunately.
I believe some mental illness, alcohol problems. So it seems like there were some other factors that could have led this to happen.
Yeah, the picture, the mugshot is from a previous DWI arrest. And we get this information directly from her in court filings. That's where we get our information. We just give you the facts of what they are. Interesting to note also that her deputy bank vice president got in on the action, and she was sentenced to 2 years in prison as she siphoned off $400,000 to her husband over a period of 5 years. So, and this is, I'm going to talk about this because one of the most common themes, Lance and Delaney, is they feel they're the smartest person in the room. Quote, this is the examiner again. Went undetected for years, which is unusual in our studies. It went on for well over 10 years. So she's a very, very bright individual, very intelligent. She had her fingers on everything in the bank that brings up the issue of control. And that's why we all businesses should have checks and balances,
Absolutely.
Even banks.
Well, one of the things that happens in a fraud case like this, and it's just like the bookkeeper for a small business who decides to pay off their credit card balance with business funds, and they get away with it. And then they say, oh, well, I can take a vacation. And so the point of the matter is, in this case, and I'm just speculating, guys, she did it once, got away with it.
Got away with it?
And said, well, I'll do it again, and continue to do it over and over. And it's like a lot of things in lending. I'm sure some of the subsequent loans probably were used to pay payments on the previous loans to keep them current so they kept off the regulator's radar. So, I mean, they have to continue to commit fraud to perpetuate the cover-up of the previous fraud.
The Inspector General did criticize the FDIC. He said, look, this was, it wasn't that sophisticated of a fraud. It's, in terms of frauds, it's the most common fraud there is. You make a loan, you put it in someone else's name, then you pay it off with a new loan. I mean, that's the easiest way to get these done. And the Inspector General criticized the bank for that. They also criticized the bank for failure to identify the existence of a dominant official. I want to talk about that a little bit. This video is geared for entrepreneurs. It's geared for entrepreneurs who want to get loans. And I was always taught, as long as you own that business, there's only one person who signs the checks. And if someone else signs them, then make sure you get the statements or you get a daily report email of what's going on. And this bank was a small business, Lance, and the directors were negligent in not putting in typical controls. As you don't have the same person signing the check that's a dominant official. So, lady, I want you to comment on this. And where we get this information is a court filing from Moody's attorneys. So this is from her side of the story. It says, hey, the reason why I did this is I battled mental illness and I had substance abuse issues, which caused this criminal behavior. She said this is the only job she ever had and the only thing that brought her pleasure. Now, this is what I have a problem on. I want to ask you as a woman on this. I call it, she played the woman card. But it also came with pressure from customers and the board members who wanted their dividends, the filing said. In a highly patriarchal, male-dominated East Texas environment, Moody's sometimes felt she didn't have the power to refuse some customers, many like family members. What do you think about that defense, Delaney?
Well, that's tough. I mean, there's no denying.
That's why you make the big bucks.
There's no denying the patriarchy is seen in the workplace, but especially in her position as a president, I think she completely reserved the right to deny people. It didn't seem like her position was in question for all those years. She was a longtime employee, and I'm not sure if that was the right card to play necessarily.
Yeah, Lance, I'm not. Go ahead, Lance. I'll let you.
Well, it's
Sort of better, Lance. Your daughter did a great job explaining it.
Bob, one of my first jobs out of college was with FDIC, and I dealt with unraveling bank fraud just like this. And I dealt with a project, and it was not a female officer; it was a male officer who was creating fake loans and funding those loans, and then it would end up in his bank account. But it was a similar thing. He didn't have authority, but someone else did, and he was utilizing fraud to make him look good to his customer.
Yes. And to make management, hey, I'm doing numbers, I'm doing a good job.
I can see that as being potentially the case here. She was trying to make people happy, and she maybe didn't feel she had the authority to do so, so she found a way to circumvent the system. So.
Yeah, no, she certainly did. Final result for Anita Moody, 8 years in jail, $11 million fine and restitution. Obviously, career in flames. And that was a terrible pun. Keep it in, Michael, but that was not my intention to say. Lance and Delaney, thank you so much for joining us for Fraud Friday. Very fascinating conversation, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you. Have a good week.
Thank you for joining us today for Coleman Reports Fraud Friday. If you enjoyed today's content, please be sure to subscribe to our channel and click that bell icon to receive notifications on our latest episodes. Thank you for joining us today for Fraud Friday and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time. Thank you.